You never can predict when that moment will come. But if you are part of making social change, you will be part of making that foundation that will determine history, determine the future. And how the media got it wrong is when she died, they said Rosa Parks was a tired seamstress. She was no troublemaker. No, Rosa Parks was a first-class troublemaker. Rosa Parks was the local secretary of the NAACP. She worked with E.D. Nixon. He came out of radical labor politics. He was one of the organizers of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. You know what the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was. Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was the union of, first the association, then the union of the porters on the Pullman trains. On this crazy trip, I was just driving through Pullman, Washington, named for George Pullman, who owned these trains. In fact, the 20,000 or so Pullman porters, conductors, African-American, one of the largest employers of African-American men in this country at the time, in the 20s and 30s and the 40s, they were all called George. All of the conductors. Of course, that wasn't all their names, but that's why they needed to be union organized. And E.D. Nixon came out of that tradition, and they'd been working to challenge the racist laws for years in the South. Rosa Parks had trained at the Highlander Center, Black and White Together, to most effectively strategize to change the laws in this country. Rosa Parks knew exactly what she was doing when she sat down on that bus on December 1st, 1955. See, the media denigrates activists. But what could be more noble than dedicating your life to making the world a better place? And to show how brave Rosa was, just go back a few months to the summer of '55, the summer of Emmett Till, 14-year-old African-American boy. His mother sends him from Chicago to spend the summer with friends, with family in Money, Mississippi. And he's with his aunt and uncle, his cousins. He's asleep in bed. And a white mob comes in and they rip him out of bed. They said he wolf whistled at a white woman. And this 14-year-old boy ends up in the bottom of the Tallahatchie River. And when his body was dredged up, his mother, Mamie Till, losing her only child, still so courageously says, I want the casket open for the wake and the funeral. I want the world to see the ravages of racism, the brutality of bigotry. Thousands stream by his casket and see, and then Jet magazine and other black publications take photographs, and they are published. And they are seared into the history and consciousness of this country. Mamie Till had something very important to teach the press of today. Show the pictures. Show the images. Could you imagine if for just 1 week we saw the images of war? So important today. Not only the images of war in Iraq, but in the war that President Obama is expanding in Afghanistan. For just 1 week, we saw the babies dead on the ground. Every newspaper that survives above the fold of photograph and the articles, the top of every newscast, 24 hours a day for 1 week. The babies dead on the ground, the women with their legs blown off by cluster bombs, the soldiers dead and dying. Americans are compassionate people. They would say, no, war is not the answer to conflict in the 21st century. Show those images. We need a media that does just that. A media that doesn't white out the agony or doesn't step outside the establishment consensus. Where are the voices in the corporate media that now are raising questions about the expansion of war in Afghanistan? Because they're there. No, maybe not in that small circle of pundits who we watch on television who know so little about so much, explaining the world to us and getting it so wrong. But in the population, same as in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, they're there. You know, at that time, FAIR did the study, the 4 major nightly newscasts in the 2 weeks around Powell giving his push for war at the UN when he was Secretary of State, February 5, 2003. Of the 393 interviews done on ABC, NBC, CBS, and the PBS NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, the nightly newscast, only 3 were with anti-war leaders, 3 of almost 400. It's no longer mainstream media. It's an extreme media beating the drums for war. Someone asked me the other day what I thought of the mainstream media. I think it would be a good idea. Because those who are opposed to war, those who are opposed to torture, are not a fringe minority, not even a silent majority, but the silenced majority silenced by the corporate media, which is why we have to take it back. You know, we talk a lot about a free media. I didn't think I would be talking as much about freeing the media, but after the conventions this summer, after more than 40 reporters were arrested at the Republican convention, among them my colleagues at Democracy Now!, Sharif Abdel-Quddus and Nicole Salazar, as well as me, we got to free the media.
Public access.
Oh, we need to, let me get to that after. Because there's not a question all over this country. Public access is so important. We were just at an event for Access Sacramento. Everywhere we go, we try to hold fundraisers for independent stations, whether low power FM, high power FM, public access. We just did an event in San Francisco for Access San Francisco. They could have their doors shuttered within 60 days. Let me get to the Republican convention. And yes, the reason public access is there is because of media activists who wrested the channels from the media monopolies, the cable companies who come into a town. One gets the monopoly to dig up the roads, so only one gets to do it, so there's not too much disruption. And in exchange, media activists wrested a few public interest channels in almost every hamlet, town, and city in this country. Because if the company gets the monopoly, they should have to give back to the public. And now the telecoms and the cable companies are trying to let go of that public interest obligation. But that's up to you. That's up to you to decide whether you're going to protect, make sure that legislation protects public access. But the convention, you know, we covered the conventions, and if you're regular listeners to Democracy Now! Or you watch satellite TV, Free Speech TV, or Link TV on DirecTV or on Dish Network, you saw or heard our coverage. We expanded to 2 hours, breaking with convention, war, peace, and the presidency, from the streets to the suites to the convention floor. We did it in Denver, then we flew to St. Paul. The first day of the convention was Monday, it was Labor Day, and we covered the peace protest in the morning. 10,000 people marched from the City Hall to the Excel Center, led by soldiers, some in full uniform, people who had just returned from Iraq and Afghanistan, some who were resisting altogether. In fact, in Standing Up to the Madness, Ordinary Heroes in Extraordinary Times, our book, we have a chapter on the soldiers who say no. Soldiers like Aaron Watada, the first officer to say no, said he studied Iraq, he investigated, he thought about it, he searched his conscience and felt he could not lead young men and women into a war he felt was illegal and immoral. Yes, the costs could be high, it could land him in jail and worse, but he thought that the consequences of going were even worse for this country and for the world. The story of the GI resistors, of the military resistors, is such an important one that has yet to be fully told in this country as it continues and grows to today, from Pablo Paredes, not far from here, to a number of soldiers who either went and then came back and said no or didn't go at all. So the march happened, 10,000 people marched, and then I went off to the convention center to interview delegates from the hottest state, from Alaska. And my colleagues went to public access in St. Paul Neighborhood Network, where we were broadcasting from. The first time a public access station would be going global, we brought in a truck to link up to set the satellite feed. And as I was doing these interviews, I got a call from our senior producer, Mike Burke, and he said, "Come quickly, Sharif and Nicole are being arrested at 7th and Jackson. They've been bloodied, they're hurt." I raced along with our cameraman, too, who is Rick Rowley of Big Noise Films, great, brave journalist who spends a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan. We raced to 7th and Jackson. There were the riot police lined up. They had the place fully contained. And I just said quickly, you can see I'm a fully credentialed journalist. You know, I have all the credentials of let me interview presidents and vice presidents and delegates, the top security credentials. And, you know, they could see that I had credentials hanging off my back and the front. I run so fast. So you can see I've got the credentials on. You know, 2 of my colleagues are inside. Producers who are also fully credentialed, we need to have them freed. I mean, it wasn't seconds before they ripped me through the police line, before they twisted my arms back, and they put those rigid plastic handcuffs on my hands. They pushed me up against the wall and down on the ground within seconds. I was protesting loudly, saying, "You know I'm a journalist, this is ridiculous, I need to see Sharif and Nicole." I couldn't find Nicole anywhere. I saw Sharif across the way. He's standing, his arm is bloody. He's